Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That's probably a good idea. Dean Menatic, thank you so much. And let me also welcome members of the great class of 2010, faculty, alumni, friends, parents, significant others, insignificant others. Now, as you can see, the economy has worn me down. But we're in a recovery. Actually, the recovery is not much of one so far, especially for a lot of the people in our society that you undergraduates, you masters, you PhD candidates with regard to social welfare are particularly concerned about. This has not been an equal opportunity recession. Now, you know as well as I do that the unemployment rate way understates the actual amount of unemployment. I used to be Secretary of Labor, and every month I would go out and talk about the official unemployment rate, but we knew, and you should know, that it does not include all of the people who are too discouraged even to look for work. And it doesn't even include the people who are working part-time who'd rather be working full-time. And it doesn't include the people who are working more than one job, or the people who are overqualified for the jobs they are working in, or the people who are working full-time but are getting a lower salary than they used to have. So when we talk about the unemployment rate right now nationally being close to 10%, that is a gross underestimate of actually the burden that is out there. But even taking that, even taking the unemployment rate of almost 10% as a benchmark, just for comparison purposes, there is a huge difference depending upon whether you have a college degree or you are a high school dropout. If you are a college graduate, your official rate of unemployment is now about 5% nationally. If you are a high school dropout, your official rate of unemployment is 15%. And that difference between how much education you have and also where you are on the socioeconomic ladder means that this recession has hurt a lot of very vulnerable people in our society far, far higher and far worse than it has hurt people who are less vulnerable. But if you take even a broader view, I would like you to come back with me 30 years. Don't even rest at the Great Recession. Come back 30 years and look at where we were 30 years ago. The average typical male, in fact, I shouldn't even use the term average, because whenever you hear the term averages, when everybody is talking about the economy, watch your wallets. Shaquille O'Neal and I, the basketball player, and I have an average height of 6'2". You see, the problem with averages is that if the people at the top bring up the bottom and bring up the middle. No, you need to look at the median. That is the typical person. Equal number of people above, equal number of people below. The median male worker today, compared to 30 years ago, is earning less, adjusted for inflation, than he was earning 30 years ago. The typical female worker is doing better, but still is doing less well than the typical male worker in terms of median income adjusted for inflation. Now, the economy is much, much bigger than it was before, much bigger than it was 30 years ago. How can it be, and this is a delicate question to ask in mixed company, but I'm going to ask it anyway, how can it be that the median wage has stagnated, that the typical family, the median family, is only doing a little bit better than it was doing 30 years ago, that the poor are doing no better? In fact, the poverty rate is going up, certainly not going down over the past 30 years, How can that be, even though the economy is much, much larger? Where did all the money go? Class? Well, the answer to it is an awkward answer for our society, and it's not because of anybody doing anything bad. The answer is that a lot of the money went to the top. If you compare 30 years ago, people in the top 1% 30 years ago took home roughly 9% of total national income. But over the past 30 years, we've seen more and more and more concentration of income at the top, which means that in 2007, even before the Great Recession, in 2007, the top 1% took home 23.5% of total national income. Now, when I say this in groups and I talk about widening inequality, people accuse me sometimes of being a class warrior. I'm not a class warrior. I'm a class worrier. There's a difference. I worry about what is happening. I worry about the difficulty that a lot of people at the bottom, the lower middle class, the old working class, the poor, I worry about how difficult they are finding it, not only to make ends meet, but also to work their way out of poverty or out of where they are. Again, 30 years ago, we had an economy, because we had a pretty good middle class and we had a lot of manufacturing jobs that didn't require all that much education, it was possible for people who were born at the bottom or in the lower middle class or in the working class to work their way up. That was the American dream. That was the Horatio Alger story that we all believed in. But it's becoming increasingly difficult for people to do that because those middle rungs, those jobs that don't require all that much education but pay fairly well, those manufacturing jobs, those unionized jobs, they are disappearing. Why are they disappearing? Well, here we come to another awkward reality. Part of it has to do with a term called globalization. Now, don't get me wrong, globalization is one of those terms that have gone directly from obscurity to meaninglessness without any intervening period of coherence. When I'm talking about globalization, I simply mean primarily trade. There is some immigration as well, but it's primarily trade, and global companies, and much of global commerce is really done by big global companies. They are under enormous pressure from their shareholders to show a profit, and so they will do whatever they have to do to get a profit, and they will outsource abroad. They will put various kinds of operations where they can get the cheapest goods with the highest productivity. They will do that. And again, we understand it. It's not as if they're breaking the law or doing anything immoral. They are simply trying to maximize shareholder returns. And some of us have pensions, and we want them to maximize shareholder returns. That's what we want for our pension funds. It's not, again, as if anybody is being wrong or evil here, but we can see that globalization has had a certain consequence for the middle class, for the poor, for the old working class, for upward mobility. Now, there's something else going on. It's not just globalization. It's also automated machinery. Now, some of you may remember, undergraduates, you may not, some of you graduate students may remember, we used to have, when you wanted to go into a bank and actually put a deposit in or take money out, you had to deal with a person. I know that sounds amazing. There were no ATMs. Or here's another example. If you wanted to place a long-distance call, I remember a time in American history where you had to actually dial 0 and talk to a person. You look incredulous. No, it's true. It is true. Or here's another example. We had, in this country, places where you took your car, and they were called service stations. Really, I'm not kidding. They were and people would come out, and they would ask you a question. You'd stay in your car, and you'd roll down the window, and they'd say, "Do you want your oil changed?" I know you don't believe this, but I promise you. In fact, here's something. I would like any parents or grandparents who remember this to put up your hands. How many of you remember a time when we had service stations where people were in uniforms? Anybody? Well, there are about 4 of you who do remember. Look, it wasn't that long ago. When I went to Washington as Secretary of Labor, before I went down, I went to a local service station, had my car checked, there were people there, and then years later, when I came back from being in Washington, I went down to the same place. There was nobody there. Nobody. Nobody. By the way, you know you are no longer in the president's cabinet when you get in the back seat of your car and there's nobody in the front seat. It's a dead giveaway. It took me a long time to adjust. But here's my point. What happened to all of those telephone operators and those bank tellers and all of those service station attendants? What happened? What happened to them? You see, it's similar to globalization. They were displaced by technology. They were displaced by automated machines. Now, what I'm getting at is nobody is being bad, nobody's being evil, but the economy is changing. There are structural changes in the economy. And the structural changes we've seen have loaded the dice in favor of people with good educations, with college degrees, loaded the dice in favor of people who have the right connections, but at the same time made it harder and harder for people at the bottom or at the lower middle, or even many people in the middle, to get ahead. Most of them, without the right education and without the right connections, where are they? Well, they will get jobs when this recession is over. That's the nice part about a recession. You see, there's a business cycle, and what goes down, it's sort of the opposite of Isaac Newton's law. What goes down goes up. Eventually, this will turn around, jobs will come back, but the question is, what kind of jobs? The issue is not unemployment per se. The issue is the quality of jobs that people get. And if the jobs that come back for many Americans are jobs that don't pay very much because they are retail jobs or restaurant jobs or hotel jobs or hospital orderly jobs, or they are very, very low-paid jobs that really don't require any skill, and therefore people and their families cannot get by on these jobs, we will not have accomplished very much. We'll have low unemployment, but we will have a lot of very poor people. Now, this is where you come in, all of you, because you are equipped to help with all of this in ways that very few other people are. There are 3 things that I want you to carry away from here today. Just 3 things. In fact, studies show years later, when people are asked who was their commencement speaker and what did he or she say, approximately 0.0005 have any memory. So you will not remember anything, I promise you. But I'm just going to ask you to remember just these 3 things. Number 1, public service is a noble and important calling. I can say this, 42 years ago, I got my first job in public service. 42 years ago, it was in Senator Robert F. Kennedy's Senate office. Now, it wasn't a glamorous job. I was in charge of his signature machine. My job was to take letters that had been written by his assistants and secretaries on his stationery, line them up perfectly, and have this big arm. In those days, it was hardly automated at all. It was a big, almost mechanical arm with a pen in it, lined up perfectly, and write Robert F. Kennedy. And I did that. I did that for months and months, and I got bored. And one night, just to relieve my boredom, I went in and on his stationery typed some letters to my friends. Dear Mr. Dworkin, congratulations on having the largest nose in New York State. Robert F. Kennedy. And then I put it in the signature machine, Robert F. Kennedy. People still have these letters. They're priceless. They go for thousands on eBay. But one day, and I was doing this for months and months and months, and I thought, well, this is public service. It's not glamorous, but it's public service. And one day, the elevator in the Senate opened, and out of the elevator stepped Robert F. Kennedy. I hadn't seen him. I was just writing his name or having the electric arm or the arm doing, and here he was. He actually opened the, I mean, there were two people standing on both sides of him yelling in his ear about some piece of legislation, and he came out of the elevator. I was standing there speechless. I mean, I was struck dumb. Here was Robert F. Kennedy, and he looked at me and he said, "How's it going, Bob?" Bob? My name was Bob. He knew my name. And I'll tell you something, I was so filled with excitement and so inspired by that reality that he knew my name that I was ready to go back to that signature machine and work it for another 3 years and not even send a single letter to my friends. But many of you are going to be doing far more important things. You are going to be caseworkers in hospitals. You're going to be with public social service agencies and schools. You will work in child welfare services, with the homeless, or with the mentally ill. And let me tell you something, despite shrinking budgets and disappearing services, in fact, because of them, your work is more important now than ever before. That is the first thing I want you to take away. The importance, the dignity, the nobility of what you are about to do. Number two, you will be and you must be agents of change. Now that means you will be and you must be leaders. Many distressed individuals and families can change for the better only if their communities and their neighborhoods are changed for the better. Many communities and neighborhoods can change only if counties and states and even the nation changes. Someone I know did start as a community organizer, and he is now President of the United States. A friend of mine somebody else that I met when I was 22 years old, and he was 22 years old. We met on a ship going over for graduate work in England, and I was very seasick, and he came down with crackers and hot tea. And he knocked on my door, and I saw him, a tall, gangly southerner with a southern accent from Arkansas, and he said to me, "I hear you weren't feeling so well." He did not say at the time, "I feel your pain." His name was Bill Clinton. And we started talking, and I asked him what he wanted to do with his life, and he said, "I'm going to be governor of Arkansas." I said, "What? You and I are 22 years old. How can you think about being governor of Arkansas?" But you know something? He did have that in mind, and some people said that they heard him say, I didn't, that he wanted to be President of the United States. Well, I'm not urging that upon you, but I am urging you to be leaders, to understand that the essence of leadership, and some of you are already doing this, already leaders. The essence of leadership is to get people around you to focus their attention on some problem that needs to be addressed, and not use a work avoidance mechanism like it's not really there, or I'm denying it, or I'm going to escape from it somehow, or it's their fault, or the worst work avoidance mechanism of all that you as a leader have got to overcome if anything is going to be done for the poor, for the disadvantaged, for the marginalized or in our society. What you have got to overcome is their feeling that nothing will help, their cynicism. Cynicism is the worst work avoidance mechanism of it all. And leaders help people overcome cynicism. And finally, lesson number 3. Know the difference between tenacity and martyrdom. What do I mean by that? I want you to be tenacious. I want you to work very hard. You are going to have to work hard. Many of the problems you are going to be dealing with, individual problems, family problems, community problems, social structure problems, economic issues that are behind all of these, they are not going to give way easily or quickly. You have got to be patient. You've got to be tenacious. But at the same time, I don't want you to martyr yourselves. I don't want you to basically burn out. Now, there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be failures. Change does not come easily, but societies do change. Yet it will do no good to anybody if you burn yourself out or you finally succumb to cynicism. In other words, accept what you cannot change, at least right away, and dedicate yourself again and again to changing what you cannot accept. So, members of the class of 2010, go forth and do your best. Know that you are embarked on a noble and important calling. Comfort the afflicted, even if that means that on occasion you may have to afflict the comfortable. And use every opportunity you find to renew and re-energize yourself. May your work be filled with meaning. May your days be filled with purpose. And may your lives be filled with joy. Thank you. Good luck.